city's richest man gave me a choice, $8 million or his daughter. Was that even a choice? To hesitate for even a second would be a sign of disrespect to the 8 million. Only a fool would choose his daughter. But I was that fool and I chose her. Little did I know that this very choice would condemn me to the next 10 years of living a life as insignificant as dust. I desperately chased after Isabella Miller's shadow, only to be met with her cold indifference and scornful looks. In the end, while accompanying her on a shopping trip, I took a knife for her and died in a dark alley. Before I died, the last thing I saw was her completely unfazed face, as if I were just a stranger to her. This time, I refused to be the devoted lapdog who groveled until he had nothing left. So, with a calm expression, I reached out and took the check. I looked up at my first love's father, a brilliant, almost genuinely grateful smile spreading across my face. "Thank you, sir." In the lavishly decorated private room, the torrent of rebukes her father had prepared was caught in his throat. The stern authority on his face vanished, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. The mocking sneer on the face of my first love's childhood friend also froze solid. For the first time, a crack appeared on the face of the Ice Queen who had always been so aloof and emotionally distant. I carefully folded the check, tucked it into the pocket of my faded jeans, and then stood up to give her father a deep bow. "Rest assured, sir, from this day forward, I will never bother Ms. Miller again." After speaking, I turned to my first love, my tone flat. "I apologize for bothering you so much over the past 3 years. I wish you all the best." Isabella Miller's body trembled slightly, and she finally gave me a serious look. Her beautiful almond eyes were no longer filled with their usual coldness, but with a complex mix of indescribable emotions. Before she could speak, I turned to leave. "Ethan, I thought you had some backbone, but it turns out you're just a spineless coward who sells out for money. 3 years of a relationship sold for $8 million. You're truly shameless." My steps faltered for a moment. In my past life, those words had made me lose control completely. I had lunged at him, and we ended up in a brawl before the Miller family's security threw me out. This life, I only felt a faint sense of pity for him. "You're mistaken, Mr. Vance. First, it wasn't 10 years, it was 3. Second, it wasn't a relationship, just my one-sided pursuit. Third, this isn't a sale. It's fair compensation from Chairman Miller for my efforts over the past 3 years. After all, being a proper doormat takes time and energy, and 8 million is neither too much nor too little. It's just right." I pulled open the heavy wooden door of the private room and walked out without a backward glance. The room behind me was deathly silent. Outside the hotel, the evening sun stung my eyes. I pulled out the check, and the long string of zeros on it was so real it almost brought tears to my eyes. To hell with love, to hell with dignity. I had been given a rare second chance at life, and this time I would love no one but money. I didn't rush to the bank to cash the check. A cunning old fox like Arthur Miller might have played a trick with it, like putting a hold on it or writing a bad check just to watch me make a fool of myself. I hailed a cab and went back to my rental in a run-down part of the city. The room, less than 100 square feet, was dark and damp, the air thick with the pungent smell of instant noodles, grease, and mildew. This was the place I had endured for 3 years in my past life, just to be closer to Isabella's university. I opened my 5-year-old laptop, and the screen sputtered for a long time before finally lighting up. I didn't rush to do anything, just leaned back in my chair and started thinking about my future. Reborn, what was my greatest asset? It was information. It was the economic trends of the next 10 years, which stocks would soar, and which industries would explode. I remembered it all with perfect clarity. I opened my stock trading app and skillfully typed in a ticker symbol, Phoenix Tech. I remembered it with perfect clarity. Tomorrow, this little-known company would announce a new chip technology patent, and its stock price would skyrocket from $5 a share to $200. I picked up my phone and dialed Isabella's number, my tone flat. "I've packed up all the things you left at my place. They're by the door, you can have someone pick them up whenever. Also, I'm changing my number, so there's no need to contact me again." Before she could respond, I hung up, took out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and threw it in the trash. The world was finally quiet. The next morning, I went straight to the bank. To my surprise, the check cleared without any issues. It wasn't until the text message alert showed a long string of numbers in my account that I truly believed my life was about to start over. Without a moment's hesitation, I transferred the entire $8 million into my brokerage account and went all in on Phoenix Tech, walking out of the brokerage firm. I suddenly felt an incredible sense of relief. All I had to do now was wait quietly. I didn't go back to that moldy apartment. Instead, I went to the best hotel downtown and checked into an executive suite. Soaking in the hot tub, sipping chilled champagne, and looking out at the bustling city, I felt a bit dazed. Just as my mind was wandering, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. It was Isabella. "Ethan, where are you? Did you throw away the things I gave you?" I didn't reply and immediately blocked the number. In this life, I was going to treat myself right. For the next week, I lived the kind of leisurely life I had only ever dreamed of. I slept in every day, had exquisite breakfasts at the hotel's rooftop revolving restaurant, worked up a sweat in the gym in the afternoon or lounged by the pool, and explored Chicago's nightlife in the evening. I replaced my cheap t-shirts and jeans with several well-fitted, custom-tailored suits. Clothes really do make the man. It's true. Money is a man's ultimate source of confidence. As for the Phoenix Tech stock, I didn't even bother to check on it. That night, I met up with a couple of friends for drinks at Elysium, Chicago's most exclusive private club. The deafening music pulsed around me, the air thick with the scent of money and hormones. In my past life, I wouldn't have even been allowed in here, yet now I was sitting in the best booth. "Another drink, Mr. Hayes?" A model next to me cooed, sliding closer. I smiled at her, but before I could speak, I caught a familiar figure in my peripheral vision. It was Isabella. What was she doing here? She was with Caleb Vance and a few other rich kids I didn't recognize. Caleb was bragging loudly about something, while Isabella stood there with a cold expression, completely out of place amidst the noise. She saw me too, and in the instant our eyes met, a flash of surprise, confusion, and unconcealed disgust crossed her face. Caleb followed her gaze, and an exaggerated sneer spread across his face. He pushed through the crowd, striding towards me and deliberately raising his voice to draw everyone's attention. Well, if it isn't the famous lover boy, Ethan. What's this? Spending Mr. Miller's $8 million to live it up. You think you've reached the peak of your life? The guys behind him joined in the laughter, sarcastically calling me a simp, saying I'd sold myself for $8 million and disgraced all men. My two friends beside me looked incredibly awkward and wanted to get up and leave. I gently pressed their shoulders. "Stay put." I picked up my glass, slowly swirling the whiskey inside, not even glancing at him. "Caleb, Mr. Vance, long time no see. I hear some of Vance Industries' overseas projects are having a bit of trouble." "What nonsense are you talking about?" I took a sip of my drink and continued. "Your port project in Southeast Asia has gone belly up due to local policy changes. And your European chip distribution rights, didn't Lion Bear Capital snatch those away? Those two deals must have cost you at least $500 million, right?" This was all information I had seen in financial news in my past life. Sweat instantly beaded on Caleb's forehead. This was all confidential company information. No one outside the board of directors should have known. You've been investigating me?" I set down my glass and finally looked him straight in the eye, my tone turning cold. "Mr. Vance, you think too highly of yourself. You're not worth my time." I stood up, a good half head taller than him, and looked down with utter contempt. "Why don't you manage your own mess instead of running around like a mad dog, biting at everyone you see?" The surrounding laughter slowly died down as everyone sensed the shift in atmosphere. Caleb was completely overwhelmed by my presence, his mouth agape, unable to utter a single word. I ignored him, pulled a stack of cash from my wallet, and placed it on the table. "Ladies, the party's over for me. Get yourselves a cab home." With that, I adjusted the collar of my suit and walked right past Caleb. As I passed Isabella, I paused for a moment. She stared at me, the shock in her eyes even greater than it had been in the private room. I gave her a meaningful smile. "You should learn to judge people better, Isabella." Then, I turned and walked away, leaving a clean, decisive back. Leaving the club, I didn't go back to the hotel but drove straight to the airport. Denver held too many painful memories and obsessions from my past life. Now that I had made my first real fortune, it was time to start a new life somewhere else. The plane took off in the early hours of the morning, its destination, Chicago. On the plane, I turned off my phone and fell into a deep sleep in the comfortable first-class seat. When I opened my eyes again, the plane had already landed at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Stepping out of the airport and breathing in Chicago's air, thick with opportunity, I felt a surge of energy. I didn't rush to buy a house, instead renting a long-term suite at the Riverfront, the most luxurious serviced apartment building on the Chicago River. Standing before the 360-degree panoramic windows, looking down at the glittering night view of the entire Riverwalk, I knew this was my true stage. The next day, as soon as the market opened, I got a call from my broker, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Hayes, it's up. Phoenix Tech has hit its limit up." I just gave a calm and instructed, "Don't sell until it hits 150. After hanging up, I began to plan my next move. Making money from stocks was just fast cash, not a stable foundation. I was going to build my own business empire. Relying on the memories from my rebirth, I knew clearly that in the coming years, digital health, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence would be the three biggest booms. I spent a week pulling all-nighters to create an incredibly detailed business plan. I would establish an investment firm dedicated to discovering and funding promising startups. A month later, just as I had predicted, Phoenix Tech stock price had soared to $150 a share. The funds in my brokerage account had grown from the initial $8 million to $300 million. I liquidated my position without hesitation, securing the profits. With this seed capital, Dynasty Capital was officially established in Chicago. The office was located on the top floor of the Global Commerce Tower in the River North District. I began to build my team, poaching top analysts and traders from major investment firms with salaries and bonuses far exceeding the industry standard. At first, these financial elites were skeptical of a kid in his early 20s like me. But after I accurately predicted 3 stock market circuit breakers and led them to short the market, earning $50 million in a single day, the way they looked at me changed completely. My life became increasingly busy, filled with endless meetings, countless business reports, and a constant stream of potential partners. I gradually forgot about Denver, forgot about Isabella, and forgot about that wretched past. Until one day, my secretary handed me a gold-embossed invitation. "Mr. Hayes, there's an international business summit at the Atlanta Convention Center next week. The organizers have sent a personal invitation, hoping you'll attend." I took it and glanced at it casually, but my fingers paused when my eyes fell on the list of co-organizers. Miller Corporation, they were like a persistent ghost. "Decline it for me." My secretary looked troubled. "Mr. Hayes, this summit is extremely high profile. Nearly half of the Fortune 500 companies will be there. Moreover, Mr. Zhou, the son of the wealthiest man in the region, specifically requested your presence." I thought for a moment and agreed. "All right, I'll go." A week later, I was on a flight to Atlanta as scheduled, heading straight to the convention center after landing. I never expected that as soon as I entered the venue, Caleb Vance would storm towards me, his eyes red, like a cornered beast. "Ethan, what the hell did you do?" Standing under the brilliant crystal chandeliers, Caleb grabbed my suit lapels tightly. He must have just received the news that Vance Industries' port project had completely collapsed. I glanced down at his trembling hand. Just a few weeks ago, he was the high and mighty scion of the Vance family. But now, he was nothing more than a pathetic clown in my eyes. "Mr. Vance, this suit is very expensive. You probably can't afford to replace it right now." I grabbed his wrist, applied a little pressure, and twisted. With a cry of pain, Caleb wretchedly let go, clutching his wrist and grimacing. "Dynasty Capital? Where did you get the capital? How could you possibly know my family's secrets?" "I have Mr. Miller's $8 million to thank for that. It allowed me to seize the opportunity with Phoenix Tech, which led to the Dynasty Capital of today." My casual words were like a sharp knife plunging into Caleb's heart. He froze on the spot, his face as white as a sheet. Just then, Isabella emerged from the crowd, wearing a long white dress. Her eyes were filled with shock and disbelief as she hurried to my side. "Ethan, do you have to be so ruthless?" I turned to look at her. This face, which I had loved deeply for 3 years, now seemed like that of a common stranger. "Ms. Miller, business is war. When Caleb was constantly harassing and humiliating me, you didn't seem to think he was being ruthless." Isabella opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I ignored them and, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, walked directly to the VIP section at the back of the hall. I approached Mr. Zhou and clinked glasses with him. We hit it off immediately and quickly agreed on a partnership. Dynasty Capital would join forces with the Zhou Group to develop a new energy project. "My friend, the younger generation is truly formidable. You really hit the Vance family where it hurts." I was just following the trend. "You flatter me, Mr. Zhou." I raised my glass in return. After seeing Mr. Zhou off, I was about to leave the venue when the door to the lounge opened and Isabella walked in. Her usual cold demeanor from the banquet hall was gone, replaced by a weariness and pleading I had never seen before. She spoke softly. "Can we talk? Not about business, just talk." I sat back down on the sofa, poured myself a glass of water and said flatly, "Ms. Miller, I have an international conference call this afternoon. You have 3 minutes. You never used to call me that. The 8 million, my dad was just testing you. He never meant to drive you away." "Really?" Hearing this, I almost laughed out loud. A test? Throwing $8 million in someone's face and watching them get thrown out by security. That's a test? "If you only came here to say such nonsense, Ms. Miller, you can leave." Isabella froze, tears welling in her eyes before finally streaming down her face. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked straight past her. As I brushed by, I didn't look back. "Ms. Miller, there's no need to bring up personal matters in the future. Between us, there is only business." 3 days after returning to Chicago, I received a call from Arthur Miller. His voice no longer held the authority it had weeks ago. Instead, it was filled with unconcealable anxiety and rage. "Ethan, what the hell are you trying to do? You stole the Vance family's project, and now you're buying up Miller Corp's outstanding shares." I sat in my top floor office at Dynasty Capital, gazing at the river view, and casually put the call on speaker. My voice was calm. "Mr. Miller, you taught me that in business, there are only permanent interests. I believe Miller Corp stock is a valuable investment. Is there a problem with that?" The sound of shattering glass came from the other end of the line. Clearly, Chairman Miller had reached his breaking point. "This is revenge. You're trying to destroy the Miller family because of Isabella. You give Ms. Miller too much credit. Revenge? No, I'm just making a profitable deal." With that, I hung up and blocked Arthur Miller's number. I watched the fluctuating stock price of Miller Corp on my computer screen, feeling remarkably calm. For years, Miller Corp had appeared prosperous, but it was rotten to the core, riddled with internal problems. All it needed was a gentle push from me, and this seemingly vast business empire would crumble. Before long, my secretary knocked and entered. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Isabella Miller is downstairs. She says she must see you and is willing to wait as long as it takes." I polished the Patek Philippe on my wrist, a playful smile touching my lips. A few weeks ago, I couldn't even get through the Miller family's front gate. Now, their precious daughter was waiting desperately outside my office. Let her wait. I'll see her after I finish this report. 2 hours later, Isabella was shown into my office. She looked much more haggard, her usually perfect makeup failing to hide the dark circles and exhaustion in her eyes. She clutched a document in her hand, the final restructuring proposal for Miller Corporation. "Ethan, I'm begging you, please stop. My father's health is poor. If Miller Corp collapses, he won't be able to take it." I swiveled in my chair to face this once unattainable ice queen, feeling nothing but scorn. "Ms. Miller, if you're going to beg, you should have the right attitude. I'm not interested in that restructuring proposal you're holding." "Then what do you want?" "I'll agree to any condition, as long as you save Miller Corp." "Really?" I stood up and walked towards her. She instinctively took a step back, a flicker of panic in her eyes. I pointed at the document in her hand, snatched it away, and fed it directly into the shredder. "I want a 51% controlling stake in Miller Corporation, and Arthur Miller must issue a public apology to me." "That's impossible. My father would never agree to those terms." "Never." I sat back down behind my desk, my gaze turning sharp and cold. "There is no room for negotiation, so there's nothing more to discuss. Ms. Miller, if you don't agree by the market close tomorrow, the Miller family will not only lose the company but will also be saddled with enormous debt. The consequences will be yours to bear." Isabella collapsed into a chair, her face deathly pale. She looked at me as if I were a demon. "Get out. Don't waste my time." I ordered her out coldly. Isabella stumbled out of the office. A few days later, sitting in my Rolls-Royce, I watched the large crowd of creditors gathered below the Miller Corp building, my expression unmoved. Arthur Miller was probably hiding in his office right now, frantically calling his so-called old friends, begging them for help. The car's Bluetooth relayed the furious roar from the listening device. "Old Lee, I'm the one who gave you a leg up. Now I'm just asking for your Miller shares, and you're talking to me about market price? Have you no conscience?" Listening to this, a cold smile formed on my lips. Arthur Miller still didn't understand that in this world of business, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests, and I had offered old Lee triple the market price. He had no reason to refuse. "If Chairman Miller won't apologize, then let's turn up the heat," I instructed over the phone. After hanging up, I signaled my secretary to initiate phase 2 of the plan. In less than 10 minutes, news of Miller Corp's alleged financial fraud and tax evasion hit the headlines of every major financial publication. This was one of the big gifts I had prepared. "This is impossible. Only the top executives know about these accounts." "Ethan, how did you get them?" Arthur Miller's desperate roar came through the listening device. I listened, feeling nothing. "Mr. Miller, this is just the beginning," I murmured to myself. Miller Corp's stock plummeted, hitting its daily limit down. Its market value evaporated by over $1 billion in just 1 hour. In the evening, a torrential downpour began in Chicago. Large raindrops hammered against the car window, making a rattling sound. As I stepped out of the Global Commerce Tower under a black umbrella, I immediately saw Isabella standing in the rain. She had no umbrella and was completely soaked, her hair plastered messily to her face. Her once proud posture was now slumped. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, only to be stopped a few feet away by my bodyguards. "Ethan, please go see my father. He had a heart attack and is in the hospital. He wants to apologize to you in person." "Really? I'm begging you." I stopped and looked at her through the curtain of rain. Water streamed down her cheeks. It was impossible to tell if it was rain or tears. If apologies were enough, what would we need the police for? "Go home, Ms. Miller. Don't put on a melodrama here. It's pointless. You weren't like this before. You used to worry for days if I even caught a cold. Why have you become so cold-blooded?" "Because the Ethan who cared about you already died once in that dark alley. The man standing here now only has eyes for money, not feelings." I walked around her and headed for the Rolls-Royce parked by the curb. Isabella cried out desperately behind me, shouting something that surprised even me. "Ethan, if you'll just spare the Miller family, I'll do anything for you. Even marry you." "Marry me? Ms. Miller, with your current net worth, you wouldn't even qualify to be a receptionist at Dynasty Capital." The car door slammed shut, cutting off the wind, the rain, and her cries. The Miller Corp shareholders meeting was held as scheduled. When I pushed open the conference room door, the noisy room fell instantly silent. All eyes were on me. I walked straight to the head of the table, the seat symbolizing ultimate power. It once belonged to Arthur Miller, but now it was mine. "Mr. Hayes, as you can see, we've all signed the share transfer agreements. We're counting on you to lead Miller Corp from now on." An eager shareholder hurried forward, his face plastered with a sycophantic smile. These old foxes changed their tunes faster than they could turn a page. I opened the file in front of me, scanned everyone present, and spoke in a cold, unquestionable tone. From this day forward, this company will no longer be called Miller Corporation. It will be renamed Dynasty Technologies. All direct relatives of the Miller family must leave the company within 1 hour and clear out their offices. As soon as I finished, a commotion erupted in a corner of the room. Isabella's cousin burst in, screaming hysterically. "Ethan, by what right do you kick me out? This is my family's company. You're just some upstart who got lucky. Let go of me. Did you not hear what I just said?" Bodyguards moved in swiftly, dragging him out like a helpless chick. His curses echoed down the hallway, but not a single shareholder dared to speak up for him. I turned my head and looked at Isabella, who was sitting at the far end of the table. Her head was bowed, her hands clenched tightly together. "Ms. Miller, for old time's sake, I've left you a house. Take your father and move there. At least you won't be on the streets." My tone was flat, devoid of any pity. Isabella slowly raised her head, her eyes as vacant as a puppet's. She said nothing, simply stood up, and walked out of the conference room in silence. I stood on the terrace. The night view of the Chicago River spread out before me. The collapse of the Miller family sent shockwaves through the city's financial circles, but I knew it was merely a stepping stone in the construction of my empire. "My friend, you handled the Miller affair cleanly. However, that plot of land for the chip industrial park you've been eyeing won't be so easy to acquire. Have you heard something, Mr. Zhou?" Mr. Zhou pointed to a nearby table where a woman was sitting. Her gaze was as sharp as a drawn sword, and she exuded an unapproachable aura. "That's Chloe Sterling, the head of New York Sterling Conglomerate, and the undisputed queen of the AI field for the next decade. The Sterlings have their eye on this chip project too. They call her the Crimson Witch, and her methods are far more ruthless than you can imagine. It's no fun when the opponent is too weak." As if sensing my gaze, Chloe slowly turned her head, raised her glass to me, a smile on her lips that held undisguised scrutiny and provocation. "In my past life, the Sterling Conglomerate didn't enter the Chicago market for another 3 years. I never expected my rebirth to create a butterfly effect, causing this formidable opponent to appear ahead of schedule." I returned a polite smile and then turned to leave. After finishing the handover procedures related to the Miller family, I found myself inexplicably driving back to the rundown neighborhood where I used to live. It was still dark and damp, the narrow alley filled with the pungent smell of cooking and smoke. Glancing towards the alley entrance, I saw a familiar figure struggling with a heavy cardboard box. It was Isabella. "I bet you never expected this. I ended up living in the same place you used to. Is this the revenge you wanted?" She leaned against a peeling, stained wall, holding a cheap packet of instant noodles. The great Miller heiress, who once wouldn't set foot in anything but a top-tier restaurant, was now arguing with her landlord over $100 in rent. "I never wanted revenge. I only took back what was rightfully mine. As for how you're doing, that has nothing to do with me. Ethan, if you hadn't taken that check back then, if you hadn't been reborn, would you have loved me for a lifetime?" Hearing that question, I paused for a moment, then chuckled softly. In my past life, that question had tormented me for countless days and nights, but now, it seemed so pale and powerless. "There are no ifs. Ms. Miller, one cannot live in the past forever." I pulled a stack of cash from my pocket and placed it on the box beside her. "This isn't pity. This is a clean break. This is the last time I'll help you. Don't let me see you again." I turned and strode towards the luxury car parked at the end of the alley. Behind me, Isabella's suppressed sobs echoed through the narrow space. The clouds hung low over Chicago, creating an oppressive atmosphere. In the tea room, Chloe sat across from me. She had traded her signature black suit for a deep purple cheapao, which made her look much more gentle and elegant, but the aggression in her eyes hadn't diminished in the slightest. She looked down, preparing the tea set as boiling water poured into the pot, sending up wisps of steam. "Mr. Hayes, I hear you completely crushed the Miller family to get that chip manufacturing land. You're well informed, Ms. Sterling, but it was just a standard business transaction, nothing as dramatic as crushing anyone. In my past life, Chloe was famous in the business world for her ruthlessness, skilled at using information asymmetry to corner her opponents. Unfortunately for her, today she was facing me, a man with 10 years of foreknowledge. All her schemes were useless against me. The Sterling Conglomerate is determined to win that chip project. Name your price to withdraw from the bidding." "Ms. Sterling, do you think money is what I'm lacking?" She was taken aback, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. She must have investigated my background. In her files, I was still the poor kid who would sell his dignity for an $8 million check. But she had no idea that my appetite now was far greater than she could ever imagine. "Ethan, business is about long-term relationships. Offending the Sterling family will do your dynasty capital no good. Ms. Sterling, I have a particular flaw. The more someone tells me not to touch something, the more I want to try." The atmosphere in the tea room instantly dropped to freezing. Chloe didn't touch her tea. She stood up abruptly, her heels clicking sharply and coldly on the wooden floor. She paused at the door, turning her head to look at me. I hope your backbone lasts until next week's auction. The door slammed shut. I set down my teacup and gazed at the churning clouds outside. The Sterling conglomerate's involvement was indeed a problem, but on the future timeline in my head, Chloe was about to face a severe cash flow crisis next week due to a failed overseas acquisition. That was my trump card. The hospital corridor was eerily quiet, the air thick with the smell of disinfectant. I pushed open the door to the hospital room and saw Arthur Miller lying in bed, an oxygen tube in his nose, his face pale. In just a few weeks, he had lost a significant amount of weight, and his black hair had turned completely white. Isabella sat by the bed, clumsily peeling an apple. What are you doing here? To laugh at our family's misfortune. I'm not that idle. I came to tell Mr. Miller something. Arthur Miller slowly opened his eyes, his cloudy gaze struggling to focus on me. He opened his mouth, his voice so hoarse it was barely audible. You won. Miller Corp is gone. What more do you want? I want the deed to the old Miller factory property in Atlanta. In exchange, I'll cover all your medical expenses and arrange a respectable job for Isabella. The apple fell from Isabella's hand with a thud. She looked up at me sharply, her eyes filled with humiliation, anger, and above all, a profound sense of powerlessness. Ethan, must you buy away the last shred of our family's dignity? Dignity is earned, not given. Sign it, Mr. Miller. With a trembling, withered hand, Arthur Miller signed his name on the document. The moment he finished, it was as if the last of his strength had been drained away. I took the document and turned to leave. No one knew that beneath that unremarkable old factory lay the path of a future subway line, destined to become a core commercial district. In my past life, the Millers, unaware of its value, had sold it cheaply to the Vance family. This life, that prize was mine. At the door of the hospital room, I paused and said to Isabella without turning around, report to Dynasty Capital's HR department tomorrow. You'll be my personal assistant. This is your last chance. The next day, Isabella stood before my desk in a dark gray business suit, her posture stiff, her hands gripping a folder tightly. I didn't look up, continuing to review the bid proposal in my hands. My tone was indifferent. Ms. Miller, make 10 copies of this file. You're coming with me to meet Chloe Sterling at 3. The Sterling family's power in New York is deeply entrenched. Are you really going to go head-to-head with them? She couldn't help but ask, a hint of worry in her voice. You just need to follow orders, not ask questions. That afternoon, the atmosphere at the auction was tense. Chloe sat on the left with her core team, each of them looking calm and confident. I sat on the right with only Isabella behind me. When the auctioneer announced the start of the bidding, Chloe immediately threw out a shockingly high price, causing an uproar in the room. Isabella leaned close to my ear, her voice tinged with panic. Mr. Hayes, are you still going to bid at this price? No, but I suggest Miss Sterling take a call from her secretary first. Chloe frowned, looking puzzled. Just then, her secretary rushed in and whispered something in her ear. In an instant, Chloe's face went from pale to ashen, then completely white. How could she know? Just 10 minutes earlier, the Sterling conglomerate's European acquisition had been abruptly halted due to regulatory violations, completely severing their funding. And I had known all along this would happen. Was this your doing? I just knew the outcome in advance. Ms. Sterling, since you can't produce the funds now, I'll be taking this chip project. I raised my bidding paddle and called out a price slightly lower than the Sterling's bid. The room erupted in another uproar, with all eyes fixed on me. Chloe stared at me, her gaze so intense it felt like she wanted to skin me alive. After the auction, as I stepped out of the elevator, I found Chloe leaning against my car door, looking somewhat disheveled. Ethan, who are you really? A kid in his early 20s couldn't possibly have this kind of foresight and cunning. Who I am isn't important. What's important is that Ms. Sterling is in urgent need of capital to fill the hole in her European operations. She looked up at me sharply, her eyes filled with alarm and shock. This was the Sterling conglomerate's most secret crisis, something she had never disclosed to anyone, yet I had just stated it casually. The Sterling family has deep roots in New York. I don't want to fight you to the death. I want control of all Sterling AI labs in the southern region. I'll inject $5 billion in capital to help you through this crisis. This is extortion. That's right. But you should know, Ms. Sterling, that besides me, no one would dare invest in the Sterling conglomerate at a time like this. Chloe was silent for a long time. She was a smart woman. She knew how to choose between pride and survival. After a long pause, she looked at me, a complex mix of emotions in her eyes. Hatred, reluctance, but also a certain indescribable respect. Deal, but I have one condition. I want a stake in Dynasty Capital. Fine, but you only get dividends. You will have no say in any decisions. I opened the car door and gestured for Isabella to get in. The Chicago riverfront at night was dreamlike. I sat at a dinner table across from Isabella. She had worked incredibly hard today, even staying late to organize all the data on the Sterling labs for me. She was becoming more and more like a competent assistant. Ethan, thank you. Thank you for covering my father's medical bills, and thank you for letting me see all of this. Don't thank me. This is your payment for your work. Isabella, you need to remember, in this world, weakness is the original sin. She didn't speak, just quietly gazed at the seamless night view of the river and sky. Acquiring the Sterling AI Labs meant I had officially secured my ticket into the field of artificial intelligence. The biggest industry trends for the next 5 years were now firmly in my grasp. I ordered a bottle of red wine, looking at the brilliant lights of the Pearl of Chicago on the opposite bank, my eyes filled with ambition. Will you continue to target the Miller family in the future? The Miller family is no longer worth my attention. My goal is the stars. Isabella looked at me, her eyes holding emotions I had never seen in them before, but none of it mattered to me anymore. I stood up, straightened my suit, my gaze firm. In the AI lab, hundreds of servers hummed with a low roar. The original Sterling conglomerate logo had long been replaced by that of Dynasty Capital. I watched the strings of data flickering on the screen, knowing that these seemingly cold lines of code were the gold mines of the next decade. Isabella walked over with a stack of reports, her movements much more efficient than before. Mr. Hayes, the chief scientist, Professor Davis, wants to see you. He's extremely unhappy about your decision to drastically cut funding for traditional RD. Send him in. A moment later, a white-haired old man stormed in, pointing at me angrily. Ethan, do you know anything about research? Pouring all the funding into neural networks is a dead end. Professor Davis, in my world, there are no dead ends, only the fastest path. I walked to the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and casually wrote down several core formulas. These were deep learning algorithms that, in my past life, wouldn't be published for another 3 years, putting them far ahead of current technology. Professor Davis's flushed face froze instantly. He stared intently at the formulas on the whiteboard, his pupils contracting, his breath quickening, and his fingers trembling slightly. This is impossible. This logic, how did you come up with this? I'm a businessman. I only care about results. Do as I say. I want to see a prototype within 3 months. Professor Davis looked at me as if I were a monster, silently picked up the paper with the formulas, and quickly walked away. Having secured my position in AI, I immediately turned my attention to the electric vehicle industry. In my past life, this sector created numerous trillion-dollar business legends, and lithium was its most critical resource. Today, I was here to get the permit for the most crucial lithium mine. The venue was filled with business tycoons, and Chloe was there too. She had regained her usual sharp demeanor and was chatting animatedly with several foreign businessmen. Seeing me approach, she smiled. Mr. Hayes, you haven't even fully conquered AI, and now you want to jump into EV batteries? Don't bite off more than you can chew. How will you know if you don't try, Ms. Sterling? By the way, has the Sterling conglomerate filled that hole in its European finances yet? Chloe's expression stiffened for a moment before she casually took a sip of her red wine. And now, the company awarded the priority development rights for the Northwest Lithium mine is Dynasty Capital. The entire room was in an uproar, and countless eyes turned to me like spotlights. Chloe's wine glass trembled, spilling a few drops of red wine. She looked at me in disbelief. She had clearly allied with 3 industry giants to corner me, but she never expected that I had already bypassed them and signed an industrial support agreement directly with the local government. When did you go to the Northwest? My people have been tracking your every move, and I never saw you go there. Ms. Sterling, tracking my car is useless. You should have been tracking my confidence. I strode forward with Isabella. After securing the lithium mine permit, I temporarily put my work aside and returned to Denver to handle some final personal matters. The old Miller mansion had long been seized, with seals on the main gate. Arthur Miller, under investigation for economic crimes, was confined to a small side house on the property. I pushed open the door, and a thick, musty smell hit me. Arthur Miller sat in a wheelchair with his back to the door, staring blankly out the window. Hearing the noise, he slowly turned his head. Seeing it was me, a flicker of resentment crossed his eyes before they returned to a dead emptiness. You came back? Are you here to see if I'm dead yet? I came to get back the old things I gave to Isabella. I pointed to a rusty iron box in the corner. It contained all the small gifts I had saved up to buy for her over 3 years in my past life. Isabella stood at the door, her eyes instantly turning red as she looked at the box. Ethan, I kept all those things. I never threw them away. There's no point in keeping them. Mr. Miller, I've already paid off your bank debts. Arthur Miller turned his head sharply to look at me, a faint glimmer of hope in his eyes that was quickly extinguished. From now on, you have no connection to Miller Corporation. Isabella will continue to work in Chicago, and I will pay her a sufficient salary each month. I picked up the heavy iron box and walked out of the yard without another word. At the end of the alley, I tossed the box into a roadside dumpster. Watching it get carried away by the approaching garbage truck, I felt a shackle inside me shatter completely. At 3 in the morning, Chicago was quiet. I was still in my office, looking at several smear campaign articles that had been urgently intercepted. Although Caleb was in prison, the remaining members of the Vance family hadn't given up. They had colluded with some media outlets, jealous of Dynasty Capital's success, to spread rumors and slander me about the origins of my funds. Isabella came in, her eyes full of exhaustion, but she remained professional. Mr. Hayes, the legal department has sent out cease and desist letters, but the rumors are still spreading. Some are even accusing you of illegal fundraising. Illegal fundraising? Such a low-level tactic can't touch me. I took a sip of coffee, looking at the quiet street below, a cold glint in my eyes. Release all of our tax records and audit reports to the authorities. Make everything public and transparent. Also, contact Mr. Zhou and have him prepare for a joint statement tomorrow. Okay, I'll get right on it. Isabella turned to leave, then paused. Ethan, you should get some rest. You haven't slept in 2 days. I'll rest when this is done. Tomorrow morning, I want to see those rumor mongers bankrupt. The storm of public opinion quickly subsided. The media outlets that spread the rumors went bankrupt one after another due to libel lawsuits. Dynasty Capital's market value not only didn't fall, but it actually rose by 30% thanks to Mr. Zhou's public endorsement. I stood on the terrace once again, the entire glittering nightscape of Chicago behind me. Chloe walked over in her high heels, holding a new partnership agreement, a smile playing on her lips. Ethan, you really don't act like you're in your 20s. Sometimes I think there's a world-weary old soul living inside your young body. Is that a compliment or an insult, Miss Sterling? I took the agreement and casually flipped through it. The Sterling labs in the South have been fully integrated into Dynasty Technologies. Our first-generation AI chip is about to go into mass production. This meant I was officially transitioning from a speculator to a true tech mogul. Some people in New York have their eyes on you. The Sterling family can protect you for a while, but not forever. You need to think about an exit strategy. I don't need an exit strategy. Every step I take forward is a path to survival. Isabella came over with a coat and gently draped it over my shoulders. She had now completely settled into her role, quiet and diligent. I looked at the distant lights, knowing in my heart that this was all just the beginning. New York City. In my past life, I didn't even have the right to set foot there. This life, I would make every powerful figure in that city remember the name Ethan Hayes. I turned and strode into my office, with Chloe and Isabella flanking me. 30,000 feet in the air, clouds swirled past. The plane cut through the sky, heading towards New York City. I leaned back in the spacious leather seat, flipping through a map of New York's power players provided by Chloe. Isabella sat beside me, meticulously checking our post-landing itinerary. Mr. Hayes, the car for pickup has been arranged. However, the eldest son of the Hamilton family has sent word that he hopes you will attend the charity gala tonight. The Hamiltons? A slight smile touched my lips. The family that claims to control half of New York's electronics industry? In my past life, the Hamilton family collapsed 2 years from now due to a broken capital chain. But right now, they were still the reigning giants of New York. For the eldest Hamilton to invite me at this juncture was clearly a power play, an attempt to put me, the outsider from Chicago, in my place. Ms. Sterling warned that the Hamiltons are ruthless and have no bottom line. Should we decline the invitation? Why decline? They've already set the stage. If I don't make an appearance, how can the show go on? The plane landed smoothly at JFK International Airport. As I stepped out of the cabin, the dry, cold air hit my face. I adjusted the collar of my suit and strode towards the black Lincoln waiting outside. The car drove smoothly into the city, and as the iconic brownstones and architecture passed by, I felt remarkably calm. Luxury cars lined the entrance of the charity venue, and attendants in elegant dresses led me inside. The moment I stepped into the grand hall, the lively chatter subsided, and countless scrutinizing gazes fell upon me. Preston Hamilton, the eldest son of the Hamilton family, stood in the center of a crowd, holding a wine glass, an innate arrogance in his eyes. Seeing me, he smirked and raised his voice. Well, so this is the famous Mr. Ethan Hayes who's been making such a stir in Chicago? You don't look so special. A wave of laughter erupted around him. I ignored Preston's deliberate provocation and walked straight to a nearby sofa to sit down. Someone with 3 heads and 6 arms would be a monster. I'm just an ordinary person who enjoys making money. Making money? New York money isn't so easy to make. I hear you want a piece of the electronics chip pie? I'd advise you to go back where you came from, before you lose everything you own. As he spoke, he slammed his wine glass down on the table in front of me, splashing red wine onto the table and my pants. I calmly took out a handkerchief and wiped my pant leg. Then I looked up, meeting Preston's eyes with a steady gaze, and said, word by word, Mr. Hamilton, instead of worrying about my finances, you should be more concerned about your family's shipment of raw materials that was just seized in Southeast Asia. If I recall correctly, that shipment is the lifeblood of your family's business this year, isn't it? Preston's face changed instantly, from pale to ashen, then completely white. The Hamiltons had kept that incident under tight wraps, using all their connections to suppress it. It was impossible for any outsider to know, yet I had just mentioned it casually. He stared at me, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. The gala is wonderful, But I don't care for your wine, Mr. Hamilton. I stood up, adjusted my suit, and left under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Back at the hotel, I immediately gave my first order. Go to the underground card room in the South Bronx and find a man named Six. Bring him to me. I'll pay off his debts. Double. Isabella quickly took notes beside me. An hour later, Six was brought to my room. He was covered in bruises, his face swollen, and the moment he saw me, he fell to his knees. Mr. Hayes, please, save me. Preston will kill me. He'll definitely kill me. He can't kill you. Give me the real accounting data for the Hamilton's electronics division, and I'll send you abroad and guarantee your safety for life. Six hesitated for less than 3 seconds before nodding eagerly. After getting the Hamilton's core financial data, I didn't release it immediately. Instead, I called Chloe directly. You move fast. The Hamiltons just made their move, and you've already found their weak spot. Ms. Sterling, get your capital ready. When the market opens tomorrow, we're going to devour all of the Hamilton's core assets. After hanging up, I walked to the window and looked out at the New York City nightscape. The next day, just half an hour after the market opened, all 3 of the Hamilton's publicly listed companies hit their trading limits down. The stock exchange was in an uproar. The New York tycoons who had been watching from the sidelines could no longer sit still. What's going on? Are the Hamiltons being shorted? Who has the guts to make a move on the Hamilton family? I sat in the VIP room of the exchange, several computers in front of me. Chloe sat beside me, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she executed one trade after another. Ethan, the data you provided was devastating. The Hamiltons' capital chain is completely broken. There's no way for them to recover now. This is just the interest. Yesterday, Preston said I wasn't worthy of making money in New York. I have to show him how money is lost. Just then, Preston burst through the door of the VIP room, all of his arrogance from the previous night gone. He rushed towards me, trying to grab my collar, but was immediately pinned to the ground by my bodyguards. Ethan, you're insane. You're digging your own grave. The New York Circle won't let you get away with this. They won't. You're wrong, Mr. Hamilton. The New York Circle only follows the strong. To them, you no longer have any value. I gestured for the bodyguards to throw Preston out. Isabella stood by, watching the once invincible Preston being dragged away like a dead dog, and she let out a soft sigh. No time for sentiment. Notify the finance department to begin acquiring the Hamiltons' core assets. I walked out of the exchange, the sunlight a bit harsh. 7 days after the fall of the Hamilton family, Dynasty Capital's New York branch officially opened. The opening ceremony was a grand affair. At the ceremony, the same New York tycoons who had previously ignored me were now all smiles, lining up to hand me their business cards. Mr. Hayes, so young and accomplished, your future is limitless. Please look out for us here in New York, Mr. Hayes. Of course, let's all get rich together. Isabella, in a sleek black dress, moved gracefully among the guests, helping me handle the various social obligations. Chloe walked over, smiling. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. Now everyone in New York knows you have the Midas touch. I couldn't have taken down the Hamiltons so quickly without your financial backing, Ms. Sterling. Chloe smiled, a new light in her eyes. We're not just partners now. We're a community of shared interests. I looked at the bustling crowd below and suddenly remembered the day I was reborn. Remembered the $8 million check Arthur Miller had thrown in my face. After the ceremony, I stood on the terrace of the top floor, overlooking the brilliant lights of the entire city. Mr. Hayes, your flight to Chicago for tomorrow morning has been booked. Good. I turned and walked towards my desk, the last rays of the setting sun casting a glow on my back. The Chicago River flowed endlessly. After returning from New York, I didn't rest for a moment, immediately diving into planning our global market strategy. Isabella stood behind me, skillfully organizing files for an international merger. Mr. Hayes, several of the big tech giants are getting restless. They've sent a joint letter wanting to buy out our core AI algorithm. The price they're offering is very tempting. A buyout? They're afraid of being left completely in the dust. Tell them Dynasty Technologies does not sell its technology. Isabella hesitated, then spoke again. There's one more thing. My father was discharged from the hospital yesterday. He wants to cook a meal for you himself before he goes back to his hometown, to thank you for paying off his debts. That's not necessary. Ms. Miller, I've told you our relationship is strictly professional. Help him find a nice retirement home in Denver. Deduct the cost from my personal account. Isabella's movements froze. She lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Get back to work. The international partnership meeting with Chloe this afternoon is very important. Don't mess it up. She took a deep breath, turned, and quickly left the office. After the international partnership dinner, I walked alone along the Chicago riverfront, the evening breeze cool. Isabella jogged to catch up, holding a trench coat, and gently draped it over my shoulders. She looked at me, her eyes holding a long suppressed emotion. Ethan, if you hadn't taken that check, if you were still that penniless boy with nothing, would you, even just a little bit, still love me like you used to? I stopped and slowly turned to look at her. The riverside lights cast a pale glow on her face. The cheapest thing in this world is affection that comes too late. Your regret now is only because I'm standing at the top, possessing everything you desire. If you were still looking at that poor boy Ethan, the one who held an umbrella for you in the rain and doted on your every need, you would only feel annoyed. Her body trembled, and her eyes instantly reddened. I was wrong. I truly regret it. Over the past 6 months, watching you climb to the top, I realized that what I threw away was the most precious treasure in the world. It's too late. Some paths, once wrongly taken, can never be returned to. I gently pushed her away, letting the coat slide to the ground, and turned to leave. Behind me, I could hear Isabella's sobs as she collapsed onto a bench, but they no longer tugged at my heartstrings in the slightest. On the eve of Dynasty Technologies' global product launch, Chloe suddenly appeared in my office with her legal team, holding a capital increase agreement. Ethan, the Sterling family is making an additional investment. We want a 40% stake in Dynasty Technologies. Ms. Sterling, are you trying to stage a takeover? I picked up the agreement, a cold smile on my lips. Chloe walked up to my desk and leaned on it with both hands. This is my grandfather's decision. If you don't agree, all Sterling labs and supply chains in the South will shut down tomorrow. Ms. Sterling, do you think I would have let you become a shareholder without having a backup plan? I smiled faintly, opened my laptop, and pulled up a hidden corporate structure diagram for her to see. Chloe's gaze fell on the screen, and her face turned from pale to ashen. She was shocked to discover that the keys to all of Dynasty Technologies' core algorithms were stored on servers located beneath the old factory in Atlanta, the one I had acquired from the Millers, and that land belonged entirely to me personally. The Sterling labs and supply chains were nothing but empty shells without a soul. Ms. Sterling, the Sterling family is free to withdraw its investment at any time. But without me, your so-called AI labs are just a pile of scrap metal. Chloe stared at me, her eyes filled with reluctance, anger, and a hint of helplessness. After a long moment, she suddenly laughed. She put away the agreement and looked at me. Ethan, you really are a madman. It seems I have no choice but to be your honest partner. That's the smart choice. A pleasure doing business with you, Ms. Sterling. Watching her leave, I wiped a bead of cold sweat from my forehead. The global product launch was packed, with spotlights focused on the center of the stage. The audience was filled with political and business elites, tech giants, and journalists from all over the world. Isabella stood in the wings, her fists clenched nervously. I adjusted my tie and, to thunderous applause, slowly walked onto the stage. Good evening, everyone. Today we will define the future. As I pressed the remote in my hand, a demonstration of Dynasty Technologies' first-generation general AI system appeared on the giant screen behind me. In that moment, the entire venue fell into a dead silence, followed by a deafening roar of cheers and astonishment. Camera flashes went off incessantly. My God, this technology is 20 years ahead of its time. The buzz from the audience was palpable. After the presentation, Isabella rushed to my side, her eyes filled with excitement. Mr. Hayes, we did it. This is just the beginning. Notify the legal department to immediately begin drafting a proposal for global AI industry standards. We will be the rule makers, not the followers. Chloe came over and gave me a generous hug. She whispered in my ear, the Sterling family is completely convinced. From now on, wherever Dynasty Capital goes, the Sterlings will follow. Pushing open the doors of the convention hall, I was met with a sky full of stars and flashing camera lights. I declined all interviews and walked alone to the rooftop. The wind on the roof was strong, messing up my hair. I finally understood that the greatest meaning of my rebirth wasn't to get revenge on those who had hurt me, but to give myself the power to choose my own destiny. A year later, I temporarily set aside all my work and returned to Denver. Everything was still familiar, but the Miller and Vance families were long gone from prominence. Wearing a black trench coat and carrying a bouquet of white daisies, I walked alone to a suburban cemetery and stood before an unmarked grave. This was where I had been buried in my past life. In this life, I've lived enough for you and avenged you. You can rest in peace now. I put down the flowers and turned, only to see Isabella standing a short distance away, watching me quietly. She had quit her job and was now a teacher at an elementary school in Denver, wearing a simple cotton dress. Mr. Hayes, long time no see. Long time no see, Ms. Miller. We chatted like old friends for a few minutes, asking about each other's lives. There was no lingering attachment, no drama, just a sense of calm, as if waking from a long dream. Then we walked past each other, heading in different directions. Just then, a call came in from Chloe, her voice filled with excitement. Big boss, I have good news for you. Dynasty Capital's market cap has just surpassed $1 trillion. I know. What's the next step? I'm going somewhere no one knows me to get a good night's sleep. I hung up and turned off my phone. I took the yellowed $8 million check from my pocket, tore it into pieces, and let them scatter in the wind, finally falling into the churning waves. To hell with love, to hell with dignity, to hell with my pathetic past. This life I lived brilliantly. I walked to the sports car parked by the road and started the engine. The legend of Ethan Hayes was still just beginning. The sports car sped along the coastline, but Chloe's face involuntarily flashed in my mind. 3 days after returning to Chicago, Dynasty Technologies held its victory celebration at Elysium. My gaze drifted uncontrollably to a corner of the banquet hall, where Chloe was leaning against the railing, chatting fluently in English with some foreign tech moguls. Surprisingly, she wasn't wearing her usual black suit today, but a wine-red evening gown. As if sensing my gaze, she looked up at me, raised her glass, and gave me a toast from across the room. Halfway through the celebration, I grew tired of the scene and slipped out to the terrace for some fresh air. The crisp sound of high heels soon followed. The great Mr. Hayes certainly knows how to find a quiet spot. $1 trillion market cap doesn't excite you at all. It's just a string of numbers. The Sterling family certainly made a fortune following my lead this time. She took a sip of her wine, a serious look in her eyes. Honestly, Ethan, I've never been impressed by anyone before, but you're the first. From 8 million in Denver to $1 trillion empire in less than a year, no one can match that. I remained silent. This woman, she understood my ambition, knew my methods, wasn't afraid of my coldness, and was worthy of standing at my level. What are you thinking about? She asked softly, noticing my distraction. I came back to my senses and looked into her eyes. They reflected the lights of Chicago, and in them I could clearly see my own reflection. I was just thinking, it's not easy to meet a worthy opponent in this lifetime. What's this? Is the great Mr. Hayes admitting defeat? Not admitting defeat. I was just thinking that instead of being opponents for a lifetime, it might be better to be allies for a lifetime, and not just allies in business. The moment the words left my mouth, even I was a bit surprised. But looking into her eyes, I knew it was what I truly felt. She looked at me, the surprise in her eyes slowly fading, replaced by a complex emotion. After a long moment, she reached up, wrapped her arm around my neck, and leaned in close. Ethan, you said it. Don't you regret it? We never announced our relationship to the world, but we didn't deliberately hide it either. In the offices of Dynasty Capital, we remained partners fighting side by side. But in private, we were each other's greatest vulnerability and strongest armor. 6 months later, Dynasty Capital officially announced its entry into the aerospace sector, becoming the nation's first private company in commercial spaceflight. The news once again shocked the world. After the press conference, I took Chloe's hand and stood confidently before the media cameras. Dynasty Capital's future is in the stars, and my future is with her. Chloe leaned against me, a radiant smile on her face. Ethan and I are partners, and we are lovers. From now on, we will work together to make the name of Dynasty Capital echo throughout the universe. The cameras flashed, capturing the moment. In the days that followed, Chloe and I worked side by side, continuing to expand Dynasty Capital's business empire. We entered the aerospace industry, launching our first commercial satellite. We delved deeper into AI, bringing Dynasty Technologies systems into millions of homes. We invested in new energy, taking American technology to the global stage. The name Dynasty Capital became renowned not just in America, but across the world. And Chloe and I became the power couple that everyone in the business world envied. Someone once asked me, what was the luckiest thing that ever happened to me? I would always think of the day I was reborn, of the $8 million check Arthur Miller threw in my face. That was the starting point of my life. I would also think of that night on the terrace in Chicago when I met Chloe. Her appearance brought a different color to my life. I think the luckiest thing in this life was being reborn, seeing people for who they truly were, earning enough wealth, and meeting the one person who could stand by my side and gaze at the stars with me. Occasionally, I would remember my past in Denver, remember Isabella, but my heart would remain calm. When passing by that elementary school in Denver, I once saw her from a distance. She was wearing a cotton dress, gently teaching the children to read. I would watch for a moment, then turn, take Chloe's hand, and continue walking forward. Now, I have my love by my side, an empire at my back, and a future full of starlight. The car was on the coastal highway again. Chloe leaned on my shoulder, her breathing even, sleeping soundly. The sea breeze slipped through the crack in the window, carrying a salty scent. This road was long, just like the path that lay ahead of me. Dynasty Capital was now $1 trillion behemoth, but I knew in my heart that this was just the beginning. But things were different now. Before, I carried the weight alone. Now I had her by my side. That $8 million check was long gone, torn to pieces and washed away by the waves. Not even a scrap remaining. Just like the people and events of the past, that chapter was long closed. Reborn, I had made my fortune, built my empire, and met the right person. For the days to come, all I had to do was keep driving, with her always moving forward. The sun grew warmer, and Chloe shifted on my shoulder with a soft sigh. I leaned down and nuzzled her forehead, then tightened my grip on the steering wheel and drove towards the end of the road. The story of Ethan Hayes was far from over.